So in August 97, I read a little short story in the newspaper that says a woman, the town's grand dame, the grand dame of the town of Carthage, had been found in her freezer where she had been for 9 months. And that the man who was accused of murdering her was the assistant director of the funeral home in town. So I thought, well, that's a pretty interesting story. And I called the district attorney, a guy named Danny Buck Davidson. He gets on the phone and he says, now, Skip, people in town are all over me like ticks on a bird dog. They want me to let Bernie Tiede go free. Bernie Tiede was the assistant funeral home director. And I said, they want you to let him go? He goes, yeah. They don't care that he did it. They think he should have done it. Well, needless to say, I put the phone down and I jump in the car and I'm on my way to Carthage, this little East Texas town, and I walk into a story that is part slapstick comedy, part small town gossip, part Shakespearean tragedy, all driven by this one incredibly gruesome act of violence that Bernie Tiede committed.
Well, back in late 98, I read a Texas Monthly article by Skip Hollandsworth called Midnight in the Garden of East Texas. And anything with the name East Texas, since I spent so much of my life there, in Huntsville, Texas. So that got my attention. I read this article just about the situation between Bernie and Miss Nugent. And I just found it fascinating. Immediately struck me as a film. Like, this premise of it was so strong as a story, and I loved his character so much. And at the time of the article, Bernie hadn't been to trial yet. So we didn't know what was going to go on with the case. So I went to the trial. Skip and I actually met at the trial. Saw Bernie testify, saw some other the goings on around the trial. And that still informs what we're doing today. There's a lot in the script from that trial that I witnessed.
And so this story unfolds of a man who came to town about 10 years earlier, way back in 1985, to be the assistant funeral home director of Hawthorne Funeral Home. And he was this wonderful, cherubic, sweet-faced, gentle young man who captivated the town. Despite a lot of men at the cafe grumbling, well, that the boy was a little light in his loafers, everybody still loved him because he treated people with this great respect. And he especially treated the little old ladies of town with a kind of love and adoration that they really hadn't received much from maybe some of their own husbands.
Skip gave me a stack of his notes, and Skip is an incredible journalist. I mean, he's got a nose for a great story. He's got a really wonderful, kind of slightly twisted sense of humor. And looking through his notes is where I got the idea for the gossips. He obviously hadn't interviewed Bernie, and Miss Nugent wasn't around, so the two leads are somewhat enigmatic. It's what people were saying about them that was, to me, more fascinating than whatever the reality was between them. So that's where the idea was hatched. And from there, Skip and I just, we sort of worked on it over the years. We'd meet for hours and hours. He came to Austin fairly regularly with his Texas Monthly business. And when he did, we'd sit around and just talk about what the story could be and everything. So it was great. It was just a real fun process that went on, from the time I first talked to him and the time we were making the film. I think I did 10 other films in between. But I always told him Bernie's time will come. I really knew this story wasn't really going away. It was always there on a burner somewhere, and I felt the time would come. A lot of it was casting. I'd work with Jack in '02, and then somewhere after that I started thinking, well, Jack could, he was too young then really to be Bernie. But as a few years went on, I was thinking, Jack would be a perfect Bernie. I sort of waited timing-wise and sent it to him. I was thinking it was the right time for him. And it turned out it was. He'd never really read anything quite like that. It was just intriguing. And he just kind of wanted to start talking about it. So that was still a couple years before we started shooting.
Well, the character was something far from anything I've done before, which is always appealing, a challenge. And I thought it would be an unexpected turn from, my fans and critics. Show them a different side of Jack Black. And it's just a very strange, interesting story. I asked Rick if he had met Bernie, and he told me that he had not, but he had seen him in person when he went to the trial. And that's what I was first blown away by, is that he had gone to the trial 14 years ago when he had read about it in a newspaper, and that it had stuck with him this long, and that he'd been working on this project for all those years. And I said, well, would we be able to go see him? You know, could we go and visit him? And he said, yeah. And so we flew out to this town and went to the prison. And I just thought it was important because I'm playing him. You know, I wanted to see him face to face and see if I picked up any clues or got any information that would help me to play the role, and to ask him a couple questions. You know, if he could describe his relationship with Mrs. Nugent and what the time was like between when she died and when he was discovered as the murderer. And it was helpful.
I thought of Shirley back in the day, just because she's, you know, one of the great actresses of all time. But technically, she's a little too young then. She was, you know, whatever, in her early to mid-60s. And, you know, Miss Nugent was 81. So I thought of Shirley. I was like, can we age her? I really thought of that. But it took so long to get this film made. By the time we were finally making it, even though Shirley was still younger than Miss Nugent, she was only like a half decade younger. I thought it was close enough. And I called up her agent and said, you know, I've got a script. I really would love to, you know, you to consider for Shirley and pass it on to her. I mean, she's a little young for the part, but I think she might be intrigued by it, or who knows. But anyway, he was like, oh, bless you. I was like, yeah, I guess that's flattering to hear you're too young for the part at 76 or whatever Shirley is right now.
With the townspeople talking to the camera, like a Greek chorus, I thought, oh, this is a sociological comment on East Texas, that they only believe what they want to believe. And I thought this could be important. Of course it's funny, it's a comedy noir, but the idea of people honestly, truly, authentically loving him, even after he confessed. They didn't believe that he did it.
I think this is like a long lens microscope that goes through the pine trees and shows and exposes this little area in East Texas behind the big thicket.
So when the word got out that Rick was going to audition real, non-acting, small-town Texans to be in the movie, and that he was going to hold a day of auditions in Carthage, the town went absolutely bananas. There was a huge hullabaloo. Who was going to play the townspeople of Carthage in this movie? And there was a lot of debate over whether they even should participate, because there was a worry that the movie would make fun of the town. And there was actually one minister who told his congregation, it's unchristian to be in this movie because you don't want to be in a movie that makes fun of dead people. There were other people who were desperate to get into the movie to be able to promote their views of what they thought about Mrs. Nugent and what they thought about Bernie. And basically what the movie, just the announcement of the filming of the movie did, was it brought back up the whole debate on Bernie. Good or evil, innocent or wicked. The big vast issues have come back and are consuming Carthage again over what is the nature of man and woman. It's true.